and September the 17th, 1862. We all know what September 17th was, 1862. We've been talking that yesterday, today, and Denny and Ed done all a great job with that. July 2, 1862. The Union Army is a whoop dog on the Peninsula Campaign, after the Peninsula Campaign. 17,000 wounded soldiers lay on the James River outside of Richmond. In a 4-mile swath, 1 mile wide, suffering from wounds, malnutrition, disease, and nobody knows what to do. There was a medical director by the name of Charles Tripler. Now, Tripler gets a bad rap. He did the best he could, but he was beat down and worn out. And new Surgeon General by the name of William A. Hammond is now in charge in 1862. They need a new medical director of the Army of the Potomac. Now there's 3 people, I call it the ascent of 3 stars in 1861. They're all stationed in Wheeling, Virginia. One of them is a commanding general by the name of George McClellan. I don't get sick when we say that. The second, who is a medical inspector there, is William A. Hammond. And the third, who was medical director at that time in that area, Jonathan Levin. So these 3 men were stationed there for a few months, talking about things, interchanging. All of them had the same political connections. One moves off to become commander of the Army of the Potomac, George McClellan. The other moves off to become Surgeon General of the Army in April 1862. The third stays in Wheeling for a while, until July 2nd, 1862. He is summoned to Washington by the Surgeon General and said, "You are going to Harrison's Landing and take command of the Medical Corps. You have carte blanche. Whatever you want done will be done." Letterman arrives with chaos down there. In 3 weeks' time, he evacuates the sick and wounded. 3 weeks. First thing he does is wire his friend Hammond and says, "I need 1,000 tents. I need rations, good rations, for these 17,000 men. They're suffering from scurvy and malaria." The first ration he wants is onions, potatoes, fresh bread, vitamin C. The second thing, "I want these men out of here. This is unhealthy. We got to move them." So he brings down transports. Letterman is a doer. Plus he had help from Hammond and also McClellan. You want to punch the first one? My videographer is my wife, Karen. There's the gentleman, Letterman. Born 1824, Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. Now it's a suburb of Pittsburgh. His dad was a physician in Canonsburg. Letterman went to Jefferson Medical School, graduated in 1849. He didn't go back to Canonsburg and become a private practice. He decided to take the exam to become a federal doctor. 50 of them were in New York City taking that exam in 1850. Another gentleman who was taking the same exam was William A. Hammond. Only 9 passed, and they were commissioned as federal surgeons in 1850. Letterman went on to serve in Florida. He served in Minnesota, Fort Ripley. He served at Leavenworth, Kansas. He served at Fort Union, Mexico, San Andreas. And when the war broke out, he was in California. 1861, he's summoned to come east, and he goes to Wheeling. Next. What he started in 1862 is now carried over to what our gallant troops in Afghanistan are doing with the medical corps. They are wounded on the battlefield of Afghanistan. Within hours, they are out of that environment because of new technological ambulances, helicopters next. Transport, these are air hospitals. Within 7 hours of their wounding, they're in Germany, our big holy hospital on Storm Germany. This all started because of 1862. Next. Really started back in the Florey. In 1796, in the Italian campaign, he started a triage system and also evacuation with the blessing from Napoleon. Next. What did our Revolutionary War ambulances look like? Ox cart, another cart, a sled, stretchers, and a wheelbarrow. If I was a wounded soldier, I didn't want to come off in a wheelbarrow. But the wounded in the Revolutionary War were brought back, the surgeons were in the rear, and they got them back to a hospital environment. It took a while to do that. Next. Mexican-American War, 1846, 1848. Next. What did we learn? First use of anesthesia, 1847. There was a rank and status for medical officers. But no ambulances, no organized hospitals, regimental surgeons travel with the regiment, no provision or supplies, wounded treated near the front lines, triage. Those who are able to march, those unable to march. That's triage. That's how you sorted your wounded. Next. Civil War, 1861. First battle. Fast forward run. This was a hospital called the Spinner's House by the Stone Bridge. After a member of Congress was there and was captured by the Confederate Army. Nobody thought there would be mass casualties. The surgeon there in charge of McDowell's army said, we won't have to worry about casualties. This will be a quick affair. Boom, boom, boom. Have a few infantry charges. The cavalry charge will be an artillery. It's a great 4th of July. In fact, everybody came out from Washington thinking that. But lo and behold, at the end of the day, on 21st of July, 1861, the Union Army is as fast as their little feet can take them back to Washington. Confederates are in control of the field, and what we got? 3,600 wounded soldiers. How are we going to get rid of it? What are we going to do with it? Luckily, for the Confederates, they came out from Richmond with carts and started taking back to Richmond. We're the Union. Some of them lay on the battlefield for 3 weeks before they were evacuated out of the area. Next. In these type of carts, called Coolidge ambulance. 2 wheels, has a water supply. Can you imagine this poor guy in here as he's going over the bumpy roads? Head, tail. So that's what they started. Next. 1862. Here comes our friend, Johnson Levin. Medical field supply, triage, evacuation, and the system of field hospitals. A genius for administration. He was. Next. His boss, William A. Hammond, another visionary, another genius. He set up, we want our surgeons to have the best supplies they can. We want them to be taught. Medical inspectors would come out in the field, and we would teach our surgeons. Get rid of the bad surgeons. There were bad surgeons. That's where the name sawbones come from. A lot of surgeons, all they knew how to was sawbones. Let's get rid of that. Make sure that the surgeons keep records in their hospitals, how they are treating people. This is all sent back to Washington. It was filtered, and good things that were happening on the field, it would come back out to the surgeons in the field. He and Stanton didn't get along. It was like water and oil. They fought continuously. But he had the backing of a civilian group called the United States Sanitary Commission. So that's why he was able to do his work. William A. Hammond. Next. So he summons Letterman to the Harrison Plantation on the James River. This set up his headquarters there. Next. And these are the floating hospitals that Letterman started. It's like a floating hospital. You have nurses there, you have surgeons, you have hospital cadets, hospital stewards, operating rooms, food, everything you need. Turn them around, get them up the James River. Next. Fortress Monroe. Some of them were unloaded there, give them some time to recuperate before they reloaded them and sent them to DC. Next. He started, when he was wheeling, he and Hammond, Letterman and Hammond, designed a new type of ambulance. Notice 4 wheels, springs, water supply, this is a tripler wagon, a rougher, and we got rid of that Coolidge thing. This is a new start in how you evacuate. There would be 2 attendants on each ambulance. Next. Letterman actually set up an ambulance system. A core ambulance system would be governed by a captain, commissioned officer. His only job is to keep his ambulances in good shape and train his men how to move wounded. This is 114th Pennsylvania. They are taught how to pick up wounded soldiers, gently place them in the ambulance and take them to the hospital. Ambulance system, rolling. Next. This is the Battle of South Mountain. This is the big hospital in Burkittsville. We passed it a few times. Next. So that was in Middletown. This is in Burkittsville. The 2 hospital centers after the Battle of South Mountain on the 14th were Burkittsville and Middletown. And eventually they were evacuated back to Frederick, Maryland. Right? Letterman's system is now working. He knew because he was on McClellan's staff that South Mountain was just the opening, the curtain is rising on the bigger battle here at Antietam. Letterman pulled into Keedysville on the 15th with the staff, and he started looking for hospitals because they know there was going to be need for hospitals. So he went all around this area looking for barns, anything that had good water, good straw, a barn so he could be underneath, get the soldiers underneath. So this is what he was looking for. Next. Headquarters right here, right up there. This was Army headquarters, but it was also medical headquarters. Letterman was not out in the field operating. Letterman was a conductor of a great orchestra. He stayed here and conducted other surgeons on what they were supposed to do. His main guy was Howard. He would send him out, get replies back, how things are doing out there. Where are the wounded congregating? Can we move them to another hospital? Let's do it that way. Here at Cross. Next. Crosses show the hospitals. Next. This is, you can see over here, every flag is a field hospital. Over 30 field hospitals. On the other side of Sharpsburg, the covered hospitals. Next. Here's the chart. You can see the town of Sharpsburg. We're right up there. You can see Army headquarters. That's where we're right now. You can see names of these hospitals. Addo Farm, Sherrick Farm, Newcomber, Park, Piper, Roulette, Moomont, Poffenburg. We all saw yesterday. But these were the hospitals established. Next. And some of them are still in existence today. And we went over the upper bridge yesterday to get where Hooker was going to start his campaign. We passed the Pry Mill Hospital. Second Corps, First Corps Hospital. Over 600 patients in and around that after the battle started on the 17th. Still in this is private residence. Beautiful place. I'd like to buy it. Karen said we can't move out here. Next. We talked yesterday about the Samuel Poffenberger Farm. This is the Samuel Poffenberger Farm, also known as White Limestone Hospital. This is where Clara Barton started her work. Jenny's been in there. So she came with her 2 wagons or 3 wagons full of supplies, set up her headquarters there, and started moving supplies out of that area. She went to one surgeon. It was getting late at night. She says, "What do you need?" He says, "I have nothing to illuminate my hospital. I'm out of candles. I don't have anything. And the wounded are here." She goes into her wagon, brings out lanterns, candles. What else do you need? Bandage material. Any type of rations. That's what she did. She worked out of this area. The Hoffman Farm, beautiful farm. We passed that. It's right before the Smoketown area still in existence today. The battle is raging on the other side of those trees. It's about 2 miles from the battlefield. That's where Letterman wanted to be. That's where he wanted to make the hospital, because they're out of range of artillery. You know, the enemy never fired on the hospital if they knew there was a hospital there. But you know, when a cannonball goes off, we don't know where it's going to end up. This is the Hodgins Hospital. This was 2nd Corps Hospital. Also some 12th Corps was in there. And when the Sanitary Commission came to this area, the Civilian Sanitary Commission, they set up their headquarters in the hospital. Next. Right after the battle, tentage was hard to get to because they had to bring them from Frederick. The railroad was cut at Frederick, so they had to bring them in by wagon load. Well, this is Surgeon Anson Hurd of the 14th Indiana. He is set up pretty close to the Antietam Creek. He has no tentage, so he has to get his patients under something. This is a stretcher. These are blankets. He used anything he could to get his patients under some kind of a cover until the tentage could come up in a day or two from Frederick. In the prior mill, you'll be able to see part of his uniform. That was the mic flex, shoulder straps, and his sash. Medical officers wore green sash. Green was the color of the medical department at that time. If you didn't have a hospital flag, sometimes they put the green sash up on the tree or someplace. That way the enemy would see that must be a hospital site because there's a green sash. He wore a green sash striped across his uniform. Okay. After the battle left here, on the 17th, 18th, they started congregating the wounded into big, large hospitals. They pulled them off of other places and started congregating them. This is Locust Spring Hospital, not too far from Keedysville. Over 6,000 wounded, both north and south, were there. Behind that tree is a big spring. I said both north and south. The Union surgeons treated the Confederate wounded that were left here. Letterman had a statement. A wounded or sick enemy is no longer the enemy. We will take care of them. Locust Spring Hospital. This is left wing of the Union Army. This was their main hospital. Next. Smoketown Hospital. We went by Smoketown the other day. No buildings there. They used tents. There were over 600 acres, not 600 acres, but 600 tents in that area. All large hospital tents. And they're taking care of 12th Corps, 1st Corps, 2nd Corps. All the wounded were brought there. So you got two major holding hospitals after the battle ended. Locust Spring and Smoketown. Once the patients were ready to be evacuated fully, Letterman would let them go. They were put in an ambulance, and they would be sent to Frederick, Maryland, and from there they would be evacuated further out of that area. Letterman was of the opinion some men shouldn't be moved. Their wounds are too grave. Don't put them in an ambulance going over bumpy roads for 30 miles to Frederick. You'll kill them. A lot of the civilians came here looking for their wounded soldiers. And Letterman had to almost beg, don't take them out. They're not ready to be evacuated yet. But some of them insisted. They wanted to take their son home. Letterman probably had to sign a statement. You take them home, it's your word. But he wanted to control this until they were ready to be evacuated out of here. Next. The battle ended on the 17th. 23,000 casualties on the battlefield. As I mentioned at Bull Run, 3,600 casualties. 3 weeks. Within 2.5 days, every casualty was in a hospital environment due to Letterman plan evacuation. He was a doer. Next. Bodies and corpses. We mentioned this was the first battle that was ever photographed. Brady sent his men out here taking pictures of what floated Confederate soldiers. Sent them back to D.C. to New York City. We had a gallery set up. People would pay 25 cents, 50 cents to come in and view that. Brought the horrors of war to the parlors of New York City. Before that, they made drawings of, wounded or sick soldiers or something like that. This is the reality of war. War is hell. Next. We're going to evacuate a soldier from the Cornfield. We were at the Cornfield yesterday. Private Durling was with the 6th Wisconsin. He lived about 20 miles where I live now in Wisconsin, outside a little town called Monroe. He was wounded in the Cornfield, going back and forth. And we're going to see how he evacuates out, how they evacuate him out. Next. This is what the corn might have looked like. As we mentioned yesterday, it was not in rows like we climbed today, it was hills. And they had a drought that year. So the corn, it's not like we planted back in Illinois today. You get lost in the corn. I took this picture out here a couple of years ago when there was kind of a drought. This was on park property, and I said, that kind of looked like maybe what the corn looked like at that time. So you can see the Iron Brigade troops, the 6th Wisconsin, they're moving through the corn. Next. Durling made his way back behind the Miller house. This is the Miller house that's being restored. Letterman set a system up where he sent 2 assistant surgeons and maybe a corps man to find a place where they could get shelter. And here they would set up a first aid station. It's called a field dressing station. Okay? This is the area, there's the house, and it's a low area. Right off the Hagerstown Pike. A surgeon of the 6th Wisconsin had his field dressing station there. Durling made his way back there. Letterman also said, we have stretcher bearers to take the wounded. 2 your buddies are not allowed to take you out of there. You're a wounded soldier, you got 2 of your buddies, so it's going to be 3 of you now out of action. Letterman said, no, that's not efficient. We will get the stretchers, we will get the wounded. You continue to fight, as long as your commander says so. So Durling was brought here. He had a wound in the lower leg. His leg was put a tourniquet on it and bandaged, and he's going to be evacuated fully more. Next. This is what a field dressing station looked like in a drawing. A surgeon, another surgeon, and a hospital steward with a backpack of supplies. Opiates, morphine for pain relief, tourniquets, bandage material, hospital whiskey. Give them a little dose of that, you feel a little bit better maybe, but it's counterproductive. And then you can see the ambulances are being brought in. The ambulances be brought, the ones that have to be evacuated fully, put them in the ambulance and get them out of the area. Next. The Pottenberger, this is Joseph Pottenberger farm. The barn was restored. Field hospital area there. That was Hooker's headquarters the night before the battle. Next. This is a drawing interior. You can see the ambulance pulled up, wounded are taken off, an operating table, and people ready to be taken care of by the surgeon. You imagine 4 surgeons. You got maybe 2 or 3 surgeons, 4 max in a hospital. You got 600, 700, maybe 1,000 casualties laying outside of a barn such as this. They work day and night. Some of them were 72 straight hours. Next. From the Joseph Pottenberger farm, they're evacuated out to Smoketown Road. Yesterday, we went in the battle on the Smoketown Road. That was the way the 1st Corps and the 12th Corps went into battle. This is the way the wounded of the 1st and 12th Corps made its way out of that battlefield by the Smoketown Road. Evacuation out of there. Next. And we tried to point that out yesterday, but there's a bend in Smoketown Road. And I believe that's a witness tree that's still there, out there on Smoketown Road. Next. Now they're evacuated to Keedysville. Keedysville is a little town about 2 miles from here. Letterman went there and saw that there was a couple churches, a school, and other buildings that could be used as hospitals. So this was evacuated out. In Keedysville, a lot of the wounded from Sedgwick's charge into the Westwood were brought here. Next. This is one of the churches in Keedysville. The account of the surgeon said we were working inside the church, operating amputating. 80% of the operations in a Civil War hospital was amputation. You were wounded here, here, or here. God bless you. Hope you die quickly. The chaplain will be here. Couldn't do much for you. You're wounded in the arm or the leg. If it didn't shatter bone, didn't hurt muscle tissue, vascular tissue, nervous tissue, bandage it, get the blood out if you can find it. put them off. But if the bone is shattered and all the tissue is shattered, you can't put it back together, amputate. That's the way they were taught. Primary amputation within 24 to 48 hours. The surgeon said we were throwing limbs out of the back window of the church into a big pit. There was an account of a man had his arm amputated. He came out of the anesthetic. Anesthetic was used during the Civil War, 98% of the cases. Chloroform and ether. The man came out of the anesthetic. He said, "Ow, my arm hurts. It's terrible. I got burning pain." Well, he doesn't have the arm. But this nervous tissue is telling him. Hospital steward went out and found the arm and brought it in so he could see it, and then reburied it in the pit. And the guy said, "What pain left?" He just wanted to see his arm one more time. This is a schoolhouse in Keysville, an old stone schoolhouse. It was for sale at the time. It's been restored now. It's a beautiful old house. But that was a hospital site also. Now, we're going to evacuate. Once they're ready to travel, we're going to evacuate out of Keysville, and we're going to Frederick. Get them in the ambulances, and Letterman set this whole program. They would have a timetable, like a railroad timetable. Ambulances going out, and ambulances coming in. So they wouldn't be a big tie-up on the road. They got them into Middletown, which is halfway between here and Frederick. This big church, we passed it. The wounded would be taken out of the ambulance, taken into the church. The wounds would be dressed. The men would be given some food, about 6 hours of rest, water, anything else they needed. Then replaced into the ambulance and taken into Frederick. So it was a resting R&R place for the wounded. Letterman set this off. Next. Got to Frederick, the city of spires. There are 7 churches, huge spires in Frederick. Every one of them used the hospital. I mentioned there are 34 hospitals in Frederick. Next. This is the only picture that I know of an interior of a hospital. And this was in Frederick. This was in the church I just showed you. You can see they took the boards, didn't take the pews out of the church, they put the boards right over the pew. You can see the hospital beds, you can see the choir loft, how close they are to the choir loft. That was the Lutheran Evangelical Church on Church Street in Frederick. Next. Medevac. Letterman started this. This is so that others may live. Their only charge in medevac is to help the wounded. This is a Vietnam patch. Get them off the battlefield, get them to the hospital. That's the way they were, what they're taught and how to do it. They do it now in Vietnam. We use helicopters. In Afghanistan, we're using ambulance transports, motorized, and also helicopters. Next one. Jonathan Letterman. There was a man who was in charge of the medical department in World War II in Europe. Colonel Hawley said that there was not a day that I did not thank God for Jonathan Letterman, for what he started in 1862 and carried over into World War II, carried over into Korea, carried over to Vietnam, now carried over to our in the Mideast. Next. What happened to Jonathan Letterman? His evacuation program evolved, which I'm working on a speech I'm going to give in July to TED Talk. It evolved from here. You know, McClellan stayed here and took a lot of heat because when he stayed here, but it gave Letterman a chance to set this whole system and refine it. I think Letterman's greatest glory is the Battle of Fredericksburg. Many, many casualties with a river and pontoon bridges to get the casualties out of the other side of the river held by the Confederates, get them across the pontoon bridges, get them over to Falmouth, and there they held for a while, get them on a train, which took them to Akaya Landing, where the hospital boats would come, pick them up, and take them to Washington. An evacuation system that worked beautifully. It also worked at Chancellorsville. Again, they had a river to get across after the retreat of the Army. And then it really worked at Gettysburg. You got 3 days of casualties, 56,000 casualties. But Letterman had a problem with his commanding officer at Gettysburg, General Meade. Meade said you have to cut down the amount of supply wagons or before the battle. Letterman said, no, I need those supply wagons close. He took them to Westminster, which is 30-some miles away. And Letterman is complaining, my surgeons are going to need these supplies, but you're cutting them off from them. He makes a statement in his report. My system is working, and you will not let it work. Now, you don't tell a commanding officer that. And live, or stay around. 1863, Letterman had it with the Army pretty much. He set his system up, it was working. He set up a supply system. He had the hospital system. He met his future wife on R&R after the Battle of Antietam over on the other side of Burkittsville. Mrs. Mary Lee. October of 63, after Gettysburg, the two were married. On the 4th of January, 1864, Letterman left the Army of the Potomac. He was sent by his own request. He was sent to Philadelphia and became a medical inspector of the hospitals in and around Philadelphia. When the war ended, he took his wife and a young child, and they moved cross country to around Santa Barbara, California. He was working for an oil company. They were trying to drill oil in Santa Barbara. Didn't find much but dust. So he moved to San Francisco. He became coroner and chief medical examiner in San Francisco. His beloved wife, Mary, died as a result of childbirth in 1867. The love of his life. He said when he heard about the death of his wife, it was like a thunderstroke had hit him. Now he's with two young girls. And he's in San Francisco. He tried to take care of them the best he could, but finally he sent the girls back to live in Burkittsville with the in-laws. He stayed in San Francisco. Successful coroner. But he had an intestinal ailment left over from the Civil War. He wasn't very well then. 1872, he comes down with a life-threatening sickness. He's dying. Who does he call to come and see him? William A. Hammond got on a train across the country and with Letterman on the 15th of March, 1872, when he passed away. He and his wife were buried in San Francisco. One daughter later on became President Taft's personal secretary. She went to President Taft and said, will you sign an order that my mother and father could come back and be buried in Arlington National Cemetery? So my father could be buried amongst the men that he helped. Taft signed the order, the bodies were brought back, and now he's interred with his wife in Arlington Cemetery. Jonathan A. Letterman, surgeon for the soldiers. Thank you. Any questions?